Thank you, Sir Roger, and as ever, it is a huge pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. Actually, I think this is the first time I have been a minister where you have been in the chair, and I hope I don't somehow get the wrath that you enacted on my Liberal Democrat friend earlier and hold completely in order throughout this debate. I'd like to thank the honourable member for Cambridge for opening the debate on behalf of the Petitions Committee. He said in his own, I'm going to quote him, he said he'd opened it in an even-handed way, and actually he did, and I think he should be congratulated for that. I guess I could caveat it by saying relatively even-handed, but it was a very good job, well done, and I congratulate him for representing the views of the people that signed the petition. And I'd also like to thank all those that participated in today's debate. A decent number of people, considering the competition in the main chamber of this place. Interventions from members from Hitchin and Harpenden, Carshall from Wallington, although the honourable gentleman's just gone. It's a shame he's gone, because I was fascinated by his idea of an independent arbiter to stop incorrect statements. I thought it was odd for a Lib Dem politician to attempt to silence his own party's election machine, but so be it. The honourable member for Bristol North West, Hornsey and Wood Green, actually the honourable lady and I debated during the European referendum in a room not too far away from here. And I'd like to think, had she been here now, she would at least agree with me that the debate we had was fairly well educated, or certainly the people in the audience were, and were informing the debate very well indeed, and was very, very balanced indeed. So there were good debates that happened during the referendum, and I'm sure many members here took part in them, participating on either side of the argument. Obviously, I'd like to thank the honourable member for Bristol East, and I do recognise her long-standing and very principled position on this matter of leaving the European Union, and she is a passionate pro-European, and I respect her for that completely. When I was a member of the European Parliament, I debated with lots of people in a similar position, and I never fell out with them once, because I understand completely that they have principal positions that they're sticking to. I just happen to disagree with that position, but I very much welcome what the honourable lady said about wishing to get a good deal for the country and scrutinising that deal when it comes before this House, and I thank her for those words. The honourable gentleman, the opposition spokesman from Linlithgow and East Falkirk, I have to thank him for his contribution. He made some interesting points, which actually were probably more for Cabinet Office ministers than for the Parliamentary Under-Secretary in the Department for Leaving the European Union, but I will pass them on because there are interesting points on the rules of referenda, similar to points made by the honourable gentleman for Cambridge. So I'll ensure they are passed on. So when a debate is had on the rules of referenda in the future, he can be assured that his points are being taken into account. And then I'd also like to thank, obviously, the opposition spokesman, a gentleman I've known for, alas, slightly too long, really. And again, I disagree with him on much of what he said, but I know that it comes from a principal position where he's passionate about this subject, and I do respect him for it. But I do welcome his comments about how Chequers has moved negotiations and this debate on, and it'll be interesting to see where we get to as an opposition party, where his party gets to in its debate on these matters. I tend to think, actually, that the majority of his constituents and my constituents are actually in a slightly different place to us, where no matter how they voted, that they just want this noisy debate to end and us to get on with the job of the very detailed job of leaving the European Union in March next year. And there was a great deal of passion which was expressed by the honourable gentleman for Cambridge about how people felt about this referendum result. And I remember it distinctly, because in many constituencies here, possibly the honourable gentleman in Ipswich might recall this in his own, but there was the Pencilgate problems in the referendum, where people were worried about marking a cross with the pencil because they thought the government might change how they were voting. So there was passion on both sides of this argument, and I think it would be foolish for us to ignore that passion. And I'd also like to thank all those that have signed the petition. It's a good-sized petition, 200,000 people, including nearly 300 people in my own seat of Daventry. And this petition calls for Article 50 to be revoked if it is found that electoral laws were broken in the 2016 referendum. And it highlights two issues: the conduct of the 2016 referendum and the revocation of our notice to withdraw from the European Union under Article 50. And I will deal with each in turn. Firstly, I emphasise that it is not acceptable for any organisation to breach electoral procedures, and it is regrettable that fines have been levied on multiple groups on both sides of the referendum campaign. Electoral law must be followed, and its breaches must be decisively dealt with. And the Electoral Commission's use of its sanctioning powers show that it is doing this vital job. But it did happen on both sides, I guess. A number of pro-Remain organisations have already been fined by the Electoral Commission for breaking referendum law, including the Liberal Democrats, Open Europe, Best for Our Future, and a host of others. But I understand that's not the nature of this petition. This issue, though, is rightly and effectively being dealt with through our legal system. It is being scrutinised through ongoing legal processes, even including legal challenges to the findings of the Electoral Commission. The police must consider whether or not there has been any breach of criminal law, and there must be due process and a fair hearing. And there is an important constitutional principle that politicians do not interfere with police investigations. That said, the government will be considering the wider implications of this issue, as well as recent reports on government policy on referenda and elections. We will carefully review the Electoral Commission's report on digital campaigning, the Information Commissioner's recommendations on the use of data in politics, and the DCMS Select Committee inquiry into fake news, and take necessary action to strengthen further our democracy. However, there is no question of whether the UK government will revoke its notification under Article 50. It is our clear policy that we will not revoke Article 50. The people of the United Kingdom gave a clear instruction, and the government is committed to seeing that through. We will leave the European Union on the 29th of March next year. Parliament overwhelmingly voted to put the question of the UK's membership of the European Union to the British electorate. The simple question that was put to members of the public on the 23rd of June 2016 asked, should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? The result of the referendum, therefore, was a clear answer to a clear question, giving a clear directive to government to withdraw from the European Union, which we respected through our notification under Article 50. The result reflected not only campaigning, but considerable and prolonged debate at national and parliamentary level, underpinned by a commitment from all major parties, political parties, to respect the outcome of the vote. Almost 3/4 of the electorate took part in the referendum, resulting in 17,410,742 people voting to leave the European Union and 16,141,241 voting to remain. This is the highest number of votes cast for anything in UK electoral history. Parliament then overwhelmingly confirmed the result of the referendum by voting with clear and convincing majorities in both of its houses for the European Union notification of withdrawal bill. Further still, at the last general election, over 80% of the public voted for parties committed to respecting the Leave result. This government respects the views and wishes of the over 198,000 people who signed this petition, but the instruction received from the wider public and their elected parliament is one that cannot be ignored. The government is clear that the British people have voted to leave the European Union, and therefore that is what we shall do. As the former Secretary of State for exiting the European Union noted earlier this year, the electorate voted for a government to give them a referendum. Parliament voted to hold for the referendum. The people voted in the referendum, and we are now honouring the result of that referendum as we said we would. The government has been and continues to be committed to delivering on the instruction given to us by the British people, working to overcome the challenges and seize the opportunities that this brings to deliver an outcome which betters the lives of British people, whether they voted to leave or to remain. The British people must be able to trust in its government both to effect their will and to deliver the best outcome for them. As the Prime Minister has said, this is more than the decision to leave the European Union. It's about whether the people can trust their politicians to put in place the decision they took. In upholding the directive to withdraw from the European Union, that is what this government has done and will continue to do. We recognise that to do otherwise would be to undermine the decision of the British people, and that would be to disrespect the powerful democratic values of this country and this government and this Parliament. This government's position remains clear. Our notice under Article 50 will not be withdrawn.